Hiya, I'm back again with the next Amanda's Travels, but without any travels, because I've been working for the past 5 days since I recorded the last bit, and the weather's changed quite a bit since then as well, so it's turned quite cold and rainy, and so I'm not sitting outside shivering, I'm huddled in the cosy warmth of my van with my canine companion, whose travelling arrangements I'm here to talk about. So, first of all, the TLDR version of this is you need to see a vet with your dog at least 21 days before you travel, and preferably a bit more, so to give you time to set up an appointment, so maybe a month. The vet will tell you what you need to do, and you can just leave it in their hands. You will, of course, have to pay them. So, going into a bit more detail, the key document you need is one of these, an animal health certificate. Now, not all vets are qualified to issue animal health certificates, so the first thing you might want to do is check that your vet is, or if they're not, ask if they can refer you to another vet who is qualified to issue these. And once you've found a vet that can do these, then they should guide you through everything else that needs to be done. So the dog needs to be microchipped so that it's easy to prove he is who he says he is, or she is who she says he is, she is. But of course, dogs being microchipped is a requirement in the UK anyway, so yours probably already is, but it wouldn't hurt to check. Also, your dog has to be vaccinated against rabies, and that needs to be done well in advance. It has to be done at least 21 days before the animal health certificate is issued, hence the long period of notice that you're going to need to give your vet to get it all sorted. If you're travelling frequently, or thinking of travelling frequently, you might as well add rabies to the list of the regular vaccinations that your dog gets when he goes for his annual MOT and checkup at the vets every year. In France, rabies vaccinations are reckoned only to be valid for 1 year, not 3 as in the UK. So if you're travelling often, you might as well just add rabies onto the list of annual vaccinations. And France is usually where you'll be entering the European Union. If you're travelling with a dog, it's the most convenient way to get there. Of course, it's wise to have your dog vaccinated against parvovirus, canine distemper, kennel cough, and all those other usual things anyway. But none of that's required for the animal health certificate. So you've recruited a suitably qualified vet, you've checked your dog's chip, and you've had him vaccinated for rabies. And the next step is the actual issue of the animal health certificate. Now, once it's issued, the animal health certificate is only valid for 10 days. So you must cross over into Europe within that 10-day window. So you've got to plan these two things reasonably carefully. You can't just go on the spur of the moment. Having entered the European Union, the certificate's valid to travel there and to return to the UK for 4 months. Now, of course, you as a Brit are probably only entitled to stay for 90 days, 3 months anyway, so the 4 months is likely to be plenty. The other key thing is that unlike a pet passport, each animal health certificate is only valid for 1 round trip. So if you go to Europe, come home and then cross into Europe a second time, or to Ireland by the way, you'll need a new animal health certificate for the second trip and for a third and a fourth and so on. So this animal health certificate is a long and complicated document, and this one is in English. It has to be in English and the language of the country where you'll enter the EU. So in my case, and probably yours, French. It gets peppered with these red official looking stamps. And from my vet, which is Battle Flats Vets in Stamford Bridge near York, it cost a slightly eye-watering £250 to get this issued. Now I've heard that some vets might do it for about £100. So I may consider changing our vet, or if I travel again with Mr. Bailey, I might ask Battle Flats for a discount on the next one, because I figure they can use this certificate as a template for any new ones, so some of the work at least is already done. Now, whenever I've crossed the channel with Mr. Bailey, I've used the Eurotunnel, because it's very quick and convenient anyway. The actual crossing only takes about 20 minutes, and the check-in and waiting times are about the same as you would for a ferry, but loading and unloading is rather quicker. And price-wise, it's usually pretty economical, especially if you're happy to travel early in the morning or late in the evening when the crossings are cheaper, and obviously avoid weekends and public holidays and that kind of thing. One side note, if you try and book for the same day, on the same day that you will be travelling, the price pretty much doubles. So it's okay to only book on a Wednesday evening. If you only plan to travel at 6 o'clock on Thursday morning, you'll get the decent price. But if you book on Thursday morning for a crossing on Thursday evening, you'll find the price is double what it would have been if you, yeah, you get the idea. So where was I? Oh yes, Eurotunnel do charge you extra if you're travelling with the dog, but then they have to check the documents and so forth. So I think that's kind of fair. And it's £22 each way per dog, I think, at the moment. And you need to include the fact that you're taking a dog or dogs in your booking, because that's when you pay for everything, including the £22 for the dog. So what actually happens? Well, when you arrive at the terminal in Folkestone, you'll be instructed to take your dog or your dogs to the pets check-in building, and that's where they'll check you and your vehicle in, as well as doing the checks on the dog. Incidentally, in Folkestone there's a dedicated area for exercising your dog at the terminal. They've set it up really well. It's fenced in, there are benches for you to sit down and play with the dog. They even provide tennis balls. Couldn't be better. That aside, you walk your dog into the check-in building, and there's very friendly bilingual staff there who they scan the dogs to make sure that his chip's there and that he is who you say he is. And they don't do the scanning themselves. They give you the scanner, you scan the dog with it and pass the scanner back. And I think that's really thoughtful, because lots of dogs really wouldn't take well to being handled by a stranger to get their chip scanned, especially if the stranger smells of all the other dozens of other dogs they've handled that day. So that arrangement's really thoughtful, works well. So you hand the scanner back, they check it against what appears on your animal health certificate and check that the animal health certificate's completed and in date and all that kind of stuff. And they'll also check in your vehicle and any passengers at the same time. Then they give you a sticky thing that you stick on the windscreen, and that's got a letter on it. And when that letter is called or announced on the screens in the car park outside, you just drive to the marshalling area where you wait in queues until it's time to drive onto the train. And there are friendly people in orange jackets that wave their arms and tell you what to do in your favourite language, really. Your dog stays with you in the train, which is nice. If you take your dog on a ferry, you usually have to take the dog somewhere to a kennel in the bowels of the ship, where you've of course got to lock him in a kennel and abandon him, surrounded by other abandoned howling dogs, all very unhappy. Not a nice experience. Much better to just stay in your car or van with you. And then once you're on the train, you just stop your engine, apply the handbrake and engage first gear or park. You wind the windows down a little bit so you can hear any announcements, and then you just relax, surf the web, read a book. There's 4G all the way through, so it's easy to surf. And then much sooner than you thought, you're arriving in France, and you just drive off the train, plenty of room to manoeuvre even a much bigger van than mine, and you're on your way with no further formalities. At the end of your trip, before your dog's allowed back into the UK, he has to be treated for tapeworm or echinococcus. And this has to be done by a vet who has to sign and stamp the relevant section of the animal health certificate to prove that it's been done. This has to be done more than 24 hours before you're crossing back, but no more than 120 hours before, so that's between 1 and 5 days. And of course for this you're going to need to find a vet in Europe to do that for you. And there are various places online you can go to find English-speaking vets in Belgium and northern France or near Calais. Just Google it and you can find 2 or 3 resources right there on the first page. In the past I've often been quite keen to crack on and get home and not hang around in Calais for that 1 day's waiting period. So I've used vets in Germany and southern France as well, so as not to be waiting around in Calais. And I found that most vets in Europe have some English. You know, they've got advanced degrees and all this kind of thing, so English is probably required for that, but often their receptionists don't. So it can help to have some vocabulary prepared, and the key phrase in French is something like mon chien doit être traité contre les ténias, ténia being French for tapeworms. Now, vets unfamiliar with pet passports and animal health certificates may be a little bit bamboozled that you want them to do something as simple as administer a pill, but they need to sign the document to say that the dog's had the pill, and stamp it. They'll get the idea once you show them the document, because at least in this case it's in French as well as English. European vets, in my experience, don't really seem to do appointments. When you phone up, you say something like, dois-je prendre rendez-vous? Do I need to make an appointment? And they'll say yes or no or whatever. Often you just walk in and wait. Or an appointment will usually be available the same day or maybe the next day. They don't seem to be as rammed as British vets. In any event, I've never really had a problem getting the tapeworm treatment done, and I don't anticipate a problem this time. So on your return to Calais, you just go to the Pets check-in building there, where the same scanning and checking is done as it was in Folkestone, and then you're onto the train and you're back in Blighty. So I hope that's provided some information and reassurance. The process is a bit more expensive than it used to be, but the actual travel part is fairly straightforward once the documents are in place. At least it is if you go via Eurotunnel. A couple of other questions, and on a related note, Tony Sutton on Facebook asked whether using some kind of restraint when driving with a dog in the car is required in Europe, as if it's technically required in the UK, and do we use one? Well, I think that some kind of restraint may be required in theory, but I'm afraid I don't have one, and I've never seen anyone else using one here either. In my defence, I can see that a small dog that leaps around in the car would be seriously distracting. And a dog who sits high up in a vehicle, like on the parcel shelf in a car, I've even seen dogs sitting on the dashboard in a car. Yeah, that's going to become a missile if there's a collision, not the thing you want. Mr. Bailey is a big and very laid-back dog. Yes, I did say your name. And he generally just sits flat out on the passenger seat, or very often in the footwell. So he doesn't leap around, he doesn't distract me, and he's not going anywhere if there's a collision because he's sort of restrained in the footwell. So probably I ought to have that, but frankly, if a French policeman wanted to fine you for something, he could always find something, and that probably isn't the thing that would leap to your mind. My sister Sue also asked about dog-friendly cafes and restaurants. Well, honestly, I've not visited many cafes and restaurants because I'm here to work, you know. But in general, in France, people are a lot more relaxed about dogs indoors, especially in small towns and rural areas like where I'm working. If dogs aren't welcome in very smart establishments, there's usually a sign on the door or the window that will let you know, and then you know if you want to take your dog in, you need to look elsewhere. And you can always put your head in and ask and say something like, mon chien peut-il entrer? And they'll say, no. Or they say, oui, oui, entrez, comme il est beau, and stuff like that. Hopefully that's what they'll say. But, you know, be sensible, because a lap dog or a collie that just hides under your chair is one thing. A Great Dane that sprawls all over in a cosy bistro might be pushing your luck. Okay. Changing topic completely, Tony Sutton also asked if I've got drone licenses and certification for each country I'll visit. Well, kind of. I'm only planning to actually fly in the UK, France and Germany. And to fly my 750 gram DJI Mavic Pro, yes it is a bit old, in the UK, I need to have the aircraft registered. I've got a registration number there. And I need to be registered as a pilot. There we go, there's my flyer ID. And because this is a legacy drone and it's over 250 grams, there's very few places I can fly that in the UK without a A2 certificate of competence, which I've got here. There are places I could fly it, but they're pretty much deserts where there's nothing very much to film or photograph with it. The A2 CFC allows me to fly a little bit closer to people and objects and buildings and that kind of thing. Provided, of course, it's safe to do so. One must always do a risk assessment. None of that allows me to fly this aircraft, or any other, in the European Union. But fortunately, the European Union itself has this stuff homologated. So you only needed to register as a pilot and register your aircraft in one EU state, and that covers you for all of them. I registered in France, This is my pilot's registration, and this is the registration for the aircraft. So getting hold of this is free. You have to do an online training course, which is quite sensible, quite straightforward, and it's available in English. The only requirement to actually get the certificate is to have a French address that you can use. Well, I don't honestly live in France, but they didn't say, do I live there? They just said, what's the address? So I borrowed my sister-in-law's address. Thank you, Lorna. Having done all of that, I'm legal to fly anywhere in the European Union, but the actual rules do vary from place to place. Just to pick an example, in the UK, public liability insurance flying a drone is only required legally. It's a good idea to have it anyway, but it's only legally required if you're flying for money, for work, for hire or reward. In France, you just have to say you've considered whether it would be appropriate to have insurance given the circumstances you're flying in. In Germany, you've got to have insurance no matter what at all times. So have insurance. What else can I say about that? Oh yeah, where you can fly, the sort of types of restrictions, you know, airports, prisons, government installations, best to be wary of those. In France, they have all sorts of rules about the height you can fly in proximity to various different things, which is relatively unusual. In Britain, for example, you can either fly or you can't. In France, you might be able to fly up to 30 metres or 50 metres or to the full 120 or whatever it happens to be. But there are online mapping resources you can use. Once you know whereabouts you'll be flying, you can go and look it up on the map and see whether there are any restrictions for that area and what they are, and then you're all set to comply with those restrictions. In general, you need landowners' permission, but of course I'm mostly flying over agricultural fields, typically while the owner or occupier of that field is operating a tractor in it. So it's very straightforward. He either says yes or no, and if he says yes, I'm good to go. And there's very little I can crash into except trees or possibly a tractor, which I'm not really going to do any damage to. Although there was one site in Germany one time, back in 2019, which at first glance just looked to be a farm field like any other, but on closer inspection we found out that there was a military training area right next door, so I didn't fly there. So I hope that's answered a few more questions, frequently answered or otherwise. There's usually a note below these videos saying that if you've learnt something from them, or you've enjoyed them, or any of those things, there's a link you can click on and bung me the price of a cup of coffee or any other sum of money you feel like giving me, because nobody's paying me to make videos like this. This is done purely in my spare time, and that would be nice. Don't feel you have to, but that would be nice. If you're not going to do that, you're watching on YouTube, well, why haven't you subscribed? Oh, you have? Oh, that's all right then. Anyway, so that's that. Bye for now.